When I was 16, I went to get my first driver's license at the DMV, the old one on Kitsky, and I didn't do too well. I guess I did okay on the written test. I mean, I knew the basic rules of the road. I knew to stop at stop signs. I used my turn signals. I do remember one I got wrong on the written test. It was, in normal sunlight, how far back must your taillights be visible? 500 feet. I'd like to say I learned that, but I had to look it up again for this sermon. But where I really crashed and burned was the driving test. Oh, I could do simple stuff. I stopped at red lights and I turned and used my signals. But then came the parallel parking. And I couldn't parallel park to save my life. I think it was around my 6th or 7th attempt where I backed into the curb when the examiner closed his eyes and rubbed his forehead and said, "Just drive back to the DMV." I was sure I had failed. He must have been in a charitable mood because after we got back, in a very weary voice, he said, "Congratulations, you passed. Practice your parallel parking." I followed his instructions accidentally. My first apartment was on California Avenue in Reno, where the only parking at my apartment was parallel parking on the street. If you can't go home and eat dinner until you park your car, you learn to parallel park. I am an Olympic level parallel parker. There are a lot of rules of the road to be a safe driver, but I think the best one I ever learned was to keep your eyes forward on the road. I always tend to be looking back, worrying about people who are getting too close behind me. Christians seem to have a lot of rules of the road to be good Christians. Many of them are helpful, many of them are not. But in today's gospel, Jesus states his most important rule of the road: follow me. After his baptism, we read about last week, and his temptations in the wilderness, Jesus is back on familiar turf in his own neighborhood. He's putting together a crew for what would be an incredible 3-year journey. And follow me became the first step on that journey. Jesus finds Philip and just says, "Follow me." Earlier, he'd used a similar phrase with 2 of John's disciples who were curiously following him. When Jesus asked what they were looking for, they kind of dodged the question and just said, "Master, where are you staying?" And he just simply replied, "Come and see." After Philip was called, with complete confidence, he went and found Nathanael and told him they had found the Christ. Probably more accurate that Jesus had found him. But you see, Nathanael replied, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Because Nazareth was kind of well known for tax revolts and highwaymen and banditry and political unrest. Philip, echoing Jesus' most important rule of the road, "Follow me," just calmly replied, as Jesus did earlier, "Come and see." There are a lot of Christians that seem to think the way to get people interested in Jesus is to get in their face and tell them exactly how they should behave and what they should believe. There are like 5 or 10 other things. In the book Where the Crawdads Sing, it describes these kind of Christians this way: they serve their religion hard-boiled and deep-fried. But maybe, rather than trying to strong-arm people into faith, what would it be like if we invite people to come and see what kind of people we are and how we love this guy Jesus? When Jesus saw Nathanael, he said, "Here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael naturally wanted to know, how did Jesus know him? Jesus answered he'd seen Nathanael under the fig tree before Philip even spoke to him. And that shocked Nathanael to his core, and he immediately called Jesus both the Son of God and King of Israel. In rabbinic literature, the fig tree often symbolized a place where you studied the Torah. In other words, Nathanael was ready to hear Jesus say, "Follow me," because he had already been studying his scriptures. Jesus wryly says, "You believe because of this? You'll see greater things." And then went on to say he would see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. So far in this gospel story, does it seem like everyone has instant faith? Zap, faith. I don't know about you, it was not that easy for me. I had a much more bumpy journey of faith. Maybe like me, or like Samuel, God had to call you a few times before you're ready to listen. Or maybe you're more like Peter. Right before this gospel story today, Jesus called Andrew, and Andrew turned and called Peter. Peter's spiritual journey was not so simple and clear. He had a lot of ups and downs. He literally walked on the water to meet Jesus, but then he started doubting and sinking, and Jesus had to reach in and save him all in front of his friends. That was embarrassing. He confessed in front of everyone that Jesus was the Christ, and Jesus said, "Well done." And then a minute later, as Jesus was discussing his death in Jerusalem, Peter rebukes him. And he looks at Peter and he says, "Get behind me, Satan," in front of everyone. That was awkward. But Peter ended up being one of the greatest apostles, a true leader. I guess the important thing is God didn't give up on Samuel because he didn't listen the first time. And God didn't give up on Peter, even though he just couldn't seem to stop putting his foot in his mouth. I don't know what God's plans are for you, but I know this: God won't give up on you either. Until now, becoming a follower of Jesus sounds like a pretty individualistic kind of thing. Jesus picks out individuals and invites them to follow him. They in turn invite others to come and see this amazing person, Jesus. But if we take a moment to consider our reading in 1 Corinthians, we hear St. Paul saying, "It's not all about you. All things are lawful for me, but not all things are beneficial." Yeah, it's not all about you or about me. We have to take into account how what we do affects other people. It reminds me of wedding couples who over and over again say, "Well, it is our day." Now, I know the folks in the wedding industry push this idea really hard, using an effort for you to find the exact right venue, the exact right color choices, and a wedding dress at prices that would require you to mortgage your life for the next 10 years. I had a couple I counseled for marriage one time who said that over and over again. "Well, it is our day." Usually to excuse in some way who they were being obnoxious to, friends or family. Finally, I'd had enough, and I had to say, actually, this wedding is not just your day. It is your parents' day, it is your family's day, it is your friends' day, and it is your community's day. Paul is kind of saying the same thing to the Corinthians. You may be spiritually right that the old Jewish purification laws of what you could eat and what you couldn't don't apply anymore. But you need to consider how what you do affects other people. One of the marks of a truly mature Christian following Jesus is caring deeply about how what I do as an individual can affect others and those in my community. God cares deeply about your journey through life and your individual journey of faith, but God also cares about everyone else's. Occasionally, I am reminded that I do not live a very edgy, daredevil kind of life. Once a month, I get a Google Maps summary report in my email. It shows where I and my cell phone have traveled in the last 30 days, and most month it shows me going in this little triangle from home to the grocery store, to church, and back home. But there are those months where I feel especially adventurous, and there's a little jog in the line showing I went to Starbucks. My monthly Google Maps report reminds me of today's psalm. You trace my journeys and my resting places and are acquainted with all my ways. Jesus knew all of Nathanael's journeys and saw him under that fig tree. And you can rest assured God cares and is following your journey through life with great love and great interest. And God won't give up on you. God keeps on calling us, every one of us. There are a lot of people who make Christianity a little too complicated. And I'm sure there are a lot of good and useful rules of the road, but the most important rule of the road that God calls us to remember is pretty simple. Jesus didn't say, you have to be perfect. Jesus didn't say, you have to have enough faith to move Mount Rose. Jesus did not say, you have to be a giant of faith like Mother Teresa or Mahatma Gandhi. Day by day, just do your best to focus on this one rule of the road. Jesus did say, follow me. Amen.